Hello, my name is Tommy Puglia. I am really excited to be here at the Data Platform Summit 2022 and to be delivering this awesome session. It's recording, but I'm still online, so let's just jump right into it. And really excited topic that has been getting a lot more traction. This is actually something I have spoken about in the past. I've preached it to the mountains in terms of with user groups, with clients, and hopefully something that you are either just beginning the story at your own organization or well into it. And regardless where you are, this is a vital piece of the final piece of really having Power BI, something that people are making decisions off of. So let's kind of dive in. And again, we are really focusing today on how do we promote and adopt Power BI in your organization. Again, this is near and dear to my heart. I've been in Power BI for a long time, so just a few quick things about myself. So my name is Tommy Puglia. I am a Microsoft MVP. But like I said, been around for quite a bit. And actually been a Microsoft MVP since 2019, and I lead the Chicago Power BI user group. And I'm also, again, going through all of this. I've seen it all. I've been in Power BI since it was Power BI Designer. So I've been around both as a data analyst to the director of business intelligence, and now I actually have my own consulting firm, which, again, I love talking to people and love seeing the different scenarios of where people are at. I focus on the development, the adoption, and the training. And those are really the core areas that I love to talk to people about. So, and again, all things Power BI, from how do we build reports the right way, how do we actually have the right process, and how do we actually get people to use it? Again, I've seen the stories, I've been through it. The reason I love the consulting firm is because I've made all the mistakes, and if I could prevent people from making those mistakes, all the better. So I'm really happy to kind of talk about this framework, and there's a lot more resources out there than ever before when it comes to adopting Power BI. So we're going to really talk about things that I've seen and really talk about a blueprint. But before we do, if you love the presentation but wish I spoke a lot less, and you love Power BI, there's actually a pretty cool podcast out there called the Explicit Measures Podcast. And what we do is every Tuesday and Thursday, 7:30 a.m. Central, live, or subscribe on Apple and Spotify. We don't just talk about, hey, how to use this in Power BI. There's so many places to get the why and the how to do things. But we really, again, we focus on the why. You can learn how to do anything in Power BI online. Obviously, that's where a lot of us have learned. But why do we do things a certain way? Is that the best practice? A lot of times you realize, even though there may be more one good way to do a data model, obviously we want to have a standard data model. What's the best way to deploy it? Should we use a data flow? Is that always the best use case? What about the people involved? Have we understood everyone's needs? Do we have the empathy that's needed? So we call it the Power BI water cooler. It might be the only podcast out there where people are online arguing about Power BI, but we love it. So make sure to subscribe and join. So let's go into today's topic. And what we're going to talk about is what we're going to call maturity framework around Power BI. Again, I started dabbling in Power BI when it was Power BI Designer, and I thought it was the coolest tool in the world, being a data analyst. I decided to put all my eggs in that one basket because I figured, you know what? It's Microsoft. Everyone uses it, so excellent. Cool. And I loved how easy it was to do. But I realized very early on that it doesn't matter how well of a developer I am, or how well I can put a visual on a canvas, or how well I can write a DAX statement or create a standard model. If there's conflicting reports out there, or people are not using my reports, or there's a lack of trust in the data, it doesn't matter how good I am at my job. And I realized that the skills needed to be successful in Power BI, the hard skills, DAX, Power Query, data modeling, data visualization, knowing the platform and all the tools, is only as powerful as the ability for you to actually roll it out. people know where to go. People know how to access the right data. People trust the data, and people know how to use Power BI. So we're going to talk about this as a framework, depending where you are. And again, it's only 50 minutes, and this is something that I usually do in projects, but we're going to try to do as much as we can and try to give you guys a blueprint and a template that you can do in your own adoption project. And success that I've seen in terms of roadmaps. So not just, hey, here's the theory for adoption, but what can you actually implement? So let's kind of dive in. And again, what goes into the framework of the model? Really, it's a general statement, and we'll call it the 4 pillars. So we're going to talk about what is a core foundation of a maturity model. And again, it doesn't matter where you are in your adoption or of organization using Power BI, but really helping you assess, okay, we're here, where do we want to be? How do we get there? And part of that too is some 4 pillars that I'll call the components, a roadmap, are standardization and rollout. That I think are 4 pillars that make this successful. So the number one thing we want to start with by far is our foundation. And when we say foundation, it's understanding where you're sitting and where do you want to go. Where are you driving to? It's funny, I see this all the time. We, as data analysts and business intelligence managers or directors, or wherever you are, we always talk about the teams and departments, what data and what KPIs are they measuring toward, what are their targets? But we never stop to think about what are ours. Like, what am I if I'm a director of BI or if I'm a data analyst? What's the objective for my team or for myself at the company or with a client? What am I reaching towards to say, have I been successful? Is it being as many reports as I can build as possible? No. Is it just the volume of people using reports? Not necessarily. So we need to have some measurable goals of how we're going to measure adoption. And again, every organization could be different, again, depending where they are, where their level is. But we can measure anything, and we should be able to measure the sentiment to a degree, and we should be able to measure the culture to a degree. Actually, on the podcast, the Explicit Measures podcast, we talk about one of our episodes, can we measure trust? Can we actually measure people trusting the data they're using? So it starts with a statement of where do we want to be? Depending on the resources that you have available, you may be the only person at the company who's doing Power BI. So the statement should be a little easy, but the reaching goal may be a little limited because, again, you're the only person. You may be on a full team with database administrators, with a data warehouse already in place, with a bunch of BI people already. So going together and developing a statement, but then maybe that statement's a little more lofty. You have the resources available. So that should have something that we can measure. It should be part our usage. Our usage should increase. Part our feedback. Are people requesting the right types of reports? Are they targeted reports or just data dumps? Is it something that they're actually measuring their department on, or do they just want it in Excel? So there's a big difference there. And again, it's really understanding where do we want to be. And again, especially where are we now? And part of that too is then understanding what are our processes already in place. Do we already have our roles? Like, do I know what my role is to help with that governance, with the help with that adoption of Power BI? Am I doing everything? Am I doing the communication? Am I doing the campaigning within the organization? Do we have a stakeholder? Do I have someone at the company who has a little sway, a leadership that can actually help push it where people can migrate off of Excel, migrate off of legacy data sets or legacy reporting into this new world? And again, I cannot understate this enough, but understanding the current state of BI at your organization versus where do you want to be is the most fundamental that I've seen is a make or break and has led teams to be successful. Because if you don't know where you are, it's really hard to tell where you want to go. And if you don't know where you're going, you can go in a lot of circles and you're never going to kind of reach that objective. Again, every team that we work with, we're always saying, hey, marketing, you're trying to increase these products. Well, let's measure that. Well, we need to do that for ourselves. And part of that, too, with that statement is how are we going to roll it out? What's the best way to roll out Power BI in an organization? So let's go into these adoption strategies. And we're going to build this out into three main areas. And we're going to run through really the starting off point of how we get started. All of the things we're going to talk about today could be someone where you're just starting out in your rollout of Power BI. You could be years into it. But this can be something that you can begin to roll out and also can be a cyclical thing. So this is something that I recommend for companies I work with. And that, again, being a director of BI for a couple of years, being a data analyst for the years before that, understanding that, trying to understand not just the state of where we think we are, but where is the state of the organization in regards to their relationship with their data. I say this all the time. If my one goal, or if people perceive me as just building reports, then I am terrible at my job. My job at an organization, and my job as a BI analyst or director of BI or anyone who touches data should be to help people make better decisions, to help people measure what's important to them so they can make data-driven decisions and give them the insights that they didn't have, that act how they wouldn't be able to before. And the report's simply the medium to do so. So with that, there's three areas of the adoption strategy that we need to develop. The first is our discovery and feedback. And this is, again, getting the state. This is now we're going to put on a different hat. We're not just data now. We're going to be journalists, where we're going to understand the different departments and where their problems are and what do they like and what do they need. And then is our, what we call the revamping. This is our spring cleaning for our BI team. What are we currently doing? Does it work based on the needs of what people's ideal states are and where we want to be? And let's build a foundation that we can follow. And then finally, it's that rollout and support. And it's not enough just to say, hey, we built a great internal process on our BI team. We really need to be focusing on how do we actually then communicate that and tell people, spread the good news about data and how that can be utilized in your particular role at this company. So let's talk about discovery and feedback. So when we really talk about discovery and feedback, it's, again, I really like to say that hat of becoming a journalist, where you can basically put together a series of questions and interview different teams. If you're an enterprise company, you can break those out into different regions for sales. Maybe it's the stakeholders, leaders, people who are involved day to day in different departments, and try to understand, hey, marketing X or sales X or research and development X person, how do you currently get your data? And it's okay if they don't say Power BI, you don't have to pressure them, but it's like when you are reporting or when you are understanding the performance of your team, the performance of your company, how do you currently do that? And let them walk you through it. Well, we take this report, that's an SSRS still. Yes, that still exists in some places. We export the data, and then we have a guy who creates a pivot table. And that's what we look at once a week. Other departments, we use this Power BI report, we put a bunch of bookmarks and filters on it, and we meet once a week to kind of say where we're at. And just beginning to understand how people are actually accessing their data, and then how are they evaluating it. Because again, our report can only do so much if we don't know what the actions are on the other end, or what we're trying to do for people. And then one question I like to ask people is, if you had $1 million and 1,000 Power BI analysts working for you full time, around the clock, what would you have in a year? And asking that question, if there were resources where you're not a problem, the data could be structured any way you want and we can access anything, what would you have to make your life better, to make you help the decisions? And it's okay to ask that. Most people will not assume that you're going to hire 1,000 more analysts or you're going to have $1 million budget for Power BI, which would be great. But to understand, what does ideal look like for them? What is a desired state where all of a sudden sales can go up past the limitations of what they see, right? Because a lot of people, the old adage of Henry Ford, it's like, if I wanted to ask people what they wanted before I built the car, they would have asked for a faster horse. And I love that because a lot of times we see a tool, we think that's the limitations and that's the potential. But if you get the people go, I would really love something to alert me if customers are going to be, going to be out of our top member tier so I can call them. That would be really cool if I could get that automated. Okay? Even if that's not a possibility now for you to do, at least allows you to think what's important to them. And they're not talking about a bar chart. They're talking about something actionable for them. What are their concerns? Where do they not trust the data? And beginning to understand, I like this, but there's actually 2 reports that do the same thing. I don't know which one to trust. And again, we have a great Excel guy on our team, and he does everything for us, so I'm not going to really use Power BI. Understand where the barriers are. And what we do from there is, part of that discovery is every single department, we put together what we call a delivery project. And it's a simple document that you can collaborate with that department, those stakeholders, on a basic roadmap of, hey, here's where you are, here's where you want to be. Do you agree with what we've written down? So we're on the same page. We're the BI team, but we're working with you, right? We're not IT anymore. So how do we work together as a team and deliver this long-term goal? And then this delivery project has some quick wins. What's the low-hanging fruit? Maybe with that automation that the sales team wanted, we could put together something that will show you customers within 30 days of losing their membership, right? Honestly, for someone in Power BI, I know how to build that. And all of us can think of that way. And so that's going to be our first priority for you. And we'll do a prototype for that. And then what are the long-term goals? At this point, I say nothing should be worked on until both teams sign off. Until BI signs off on this document, until the leaders of that department or that team sign off. So part of what we do, again, is trust. And I cannot overstate how important trust is to what we do. And part of that trust is expectations. Some people say they're almost one and the same. What is my expectation of you? What is your expectation of me? And really being able to move forward from there. So no work begins until that is signed off. Now it's time to look inward. So now it's time to look at what do we actually have in the system. So how do you actually organize your content? How do you deploy content to the organization? Is it through many, many workspaces and single sharing reports and dashboards and metrics? Is it through Power BI apps? Or are you embedding everything in SharePoint? I hope not, but if you are, that's okay, I guess. But how do we actually deliver our content, and then how do we organize it? How do we name things so people understand what they're looking at? Can you name a purpose for every report? An easy way to say, does this report have a purpose or should it exist, is if you or the stakeholder of that report cannot name 3 questions that report answers, or what the action is of that report may need to be retired. So, and again, this is all that we're really meant to do. Reports are simply that medium. So going through and cataloging our data in a sense, and you don't have to use Azure Purview, which is a great tool, but with all the reports that you have, going through and saying, what is this answer? What is this actually helping someone do? Or is it just a data dump? Because someone wanted to see sales over the last 5 years, and they don't do anything with it. That is kind of understanding that, okay, we have a lot of overlapping data and a lot of overlapping metrics. And then again, now looking internally, how do we actually build reports? And I don't mean I open a Power BI desktop, I connect the data in Power Query, we have a standard SQL table. No, I mean that process working with the stakeholder. What do we actually do when we work with the team to say, hey, person X needs a report. We go through the process. Do you have a help desk? Are they messaging you when they try to get a cup of coffee? Or on Teams and going, hey, we need this report tomorrow. Can you do that? And you go, sure, because it's whoever it is. Do you have a standard process of also then accessing the data? Okay, sales, I know what SQL Server, I know what Dataverse, tables and entities to use. Do we know where to get the right data? And then how do we go through that process? So once we're able to document and we understand where externally our column your clients, but everyone who's the consumers are accessing and getting their data, how do we actually organize and deploy our content? And then how do we as a BI team go through and then actually begin to deliver that? Then we could go into, again, the spring cleaning part. And this is all about creating processes. So, and what we mean here is, okay, Now that we understand the hurdles, the barriers, this is where we can really revamp how we do things. And this is getting just some management system of how do we name our content? Do we actually have either data flows or standard dimensional tables? When we say products, everyone should know the hierarchy, right? Where it's not like, well, this team likes products this way, so I created a group in desktop, and this one I created a mesh of things. Well, again, that can get very confusing for an organization when I'm looking at one report that has a hierarchy this way, and another report that has a completely different way. And as a consumer, I don't know why. All I know is one of them's wrong, and that's the assumption. So being able to say, okay, let's build some core fundamentals in our data. One thing is like universal metrics. How do you count members, right? Some people may say we count members based on their sign-on date. Some people may say the day they first purchased something. What is a corporate universal way that we're going to count our important metrics, the things that roll up to the C-level? And then it's the consolidation. Again, going back to our catalog or understanding what reports are available. Do you actually, the ones that don't have a reason to exist, and I guarantee you have reports that have no reason to exist. I have reports that have no reason to exist. This is not a part of the skill, it just happens. And it's going through that spring cleaning to go, this report answers nothing, or these two reports are pretty much the same except for name, so we can consolidate these, I can remove this, going through the process on also using the audit log, which is a great way. There's actually some really neat features out there using the scanner API in PowerShell, or just pulling from the API where you can actually get all the activity. And one of the things that I help develop for organizations is basically developing an activity report that can actually look at days since viewed based on the person and the report. So it's like, this report has been viewed by 4 people in the last 90 days and hasn't been viewed by anyone in over 4 weeks. Maybe we don't need to refresh this report, and going through emailing those people like, we're going to archive this report. Does anyone have any issues? If they do, that can be a conversation for a better report rather than just refreshing it. And so again, it's going through and making sure that our reports are targeted as much as possible. And then there's part governance too. And again, this is why it's hard to do all of this in just 50 minutes. But and Melissa Coates and on the Microsoft documentation actually has a huge now resource on implementation and adopting Power BI. And it really breaks down different teams and organizations for Power BI. Do you have people who love Power BI? The consumers, you know the people who view it because you have that activity report. Again, super actually straightforward in PowerShell. Tad a bit of a rant or a tangent here. There should be no reason why we as a BI team or me as a BI analyst does not have this data available to me. That I should be able to easily access the activity on what people are viewing. Because then I know, hey, person X is requesting a report every other day and they never look at it. But on the same token, I know the people who are looking at my reports all the time. So these are people who are familiar with using Power BI and they probably act on it. And these can be, in a sense, your disciples, the people that can help promote Power BI within the other teams in the departments. And then what's the process of employee reports? Do you have Power BI apps? Is there an approval process? And the business changes because the business always changes. If we need to update something in our hierarchies or in our metrics, what's the process? How do we make sure that everyone who's building reports knows that change? Or do we actually have dependencies with data flows or now data marts where that will flow down to the other reports and content? And the final part of this is the rollout and support. And again, please do not skimp on this part of the adoption strategy. Do not skimp on this part because you can build the best process and you can have all the right reports and really pretty wallpapers and in your canvas, and you can badge all your certified data sets. But if nobody knows what that means, or again, no one trusts the data because no one's taught them how to look at it, no one's going to use it. And that adoption is going to fall flat. As important as the other two parts of this pillar are, this can be argued, we'll say, to be the most important. Obviously, you need the first two parts of this pillar first before you're going to roll anything out. But if you have a poor rollout strategy and a support strategy for your organization, you're going to fall flat on your face. Or it's going to have somewhat of a high, and then there's going to be a moment of distrust, and it's going to fall flat. And this is where, if I am a consumer and now things are looking nice, the reports are all off some standardization to it, we're using a template, things are named the right way, but I don't know I don't know what drill through is. I don't know what this drill down is, and hey, I filter something and I can't get back. How do I actually go back to the default state? Where can I actually get learning on this? So this is where we make sure that we're available as a BI team, or the however your team's structured, whether it's federated, centralized, you have the spoken hub approach. People can get the support and they know where to get that support. This could be through a center of excellence, a knowledge center. Certain things I help roll out with BI teams is, and that we've seen great success, is two things called Chris Wagner, actually, of Rockwell Automation, is a great advocate for this, where they have things called power hours. And these power hours are done, I think he does it once a week, but where anyone can go in and they do a training on Power BI, and anyone can join in the company. Another thing is office hours. It's an hour once a week where anyone can ask questions, and they can get one-on-one time with the BI team. And it's so easy to do now with Zoom and Teams, where you can have breakout rooms. It's like, I'm asking for questions on our Power Platform. Okay, here's your Power Platform room, one-on-one support. So don't expect people just to randomly email you with questions. Give them the avenue to do so. So those three areas of our adoption strategy are integral to beginning to understand where we're at and where we want to be. So again, a lot of theory here so far, or so to speak, a lot of strategy. What does a roadmap then look like? And this delivery project that we talked about. And that's what I want to focus on. How do you actually begin to roll this out? What are the steps? Right? This is all the areas. Well, what steps do I do? If I were to boil this down into a recipe, Italian, I live in Chicago, so recipes are a big thing in my life. But what are the steps, the ingredients? We know the ingredients. Now, how do we cook it? And that's where we're going to go on the roadmap for teams. Again, when we're talking roadmap for teams, we're really focusing on, after we talked about that scoping discovery for a certain team or department. So what's the next steps for them? And then how do we roll that out, whether this is on a company-wide scale or individual basis for a department? So let's focus on really what the core components are of our ingredients. Again, depending on how much you're cooking, we really want to follow this kind of standard steps. Again, the first thing we talked about is scoping and discovery. This is that interviews with the teams, understanding where people are at, where do they want to be. Everything we talked about in the initial area here. Then is, again, right away, developing that project plan. Again, whether it's working with the stakeholder, but the biggest thing is that roadmap, and we'll actually show what a roadmap looks like, is signed off by both teams. And then it's going to be revamping those reports, because you will get insights from the teams on that ideal state. So you can begin to prototype better reports, or those targeted reports. Like, we can't do all of that, but we can do a lot of that. And basically using Power BI as a prototyping tool. And this has become more standard in our industry now. Before it wasn't, for whatever reason. But Power BI is not just a great reporting and modeling tool. It's actually a great prototyping tool and a proof of concept tool. You can easily do sample data or use development data and just begin to, in a sense, sandbox, build a castle with somebody, say, is this what we want? I've found that the best way to do this is to have Power BI Desktop open with a stakeholder as we develop reports, and literally go through the process like, okay, so you're telling me you need this here, and just dragging and dropping, because it's so straightforward, and allowing the stakeholders and the teams to have a say. Now, rather than, here's your report, good luck with it, where they can actually have a say in what it's going to look like and what it should do. To see people lighten up, even the people who are, we'll say, data averse, so to speak, will lighten up to just getting those insights. I've literally had conversations with organizations where I joked, would you just want to, thumbs up and thumbs down? And they're like, Exactly. That's exactly what we want. So we had to develop that. And those random moments that can become enlightening for teams. Because some people, they want to be analytical. Some people, they would rather know green or red. Is this good or is it not good? And that's enough because that can help them make the decisions. Then is our development and production. So we begin to prototype these new targeted reports. And really in this process, again, we've developed a standard process. At this stage, this is something that should be consistent across the teams because this is something new you are introducing. Before, people might have been used to going to the analyst and getting their report on the side. But now it has to go through a funnel. I highly recommend using a help desk system. Jira is actually really neat for BI because there's really no BI-centric help desk tool out there. Everything's always based on you're a software developer, not you're a BI developer. But Jira you can actually really customize. And so we've had some deployments with those and seen a lot of success where, hey, if you request a report, you have to fill out this form, then it's going to go through some automation. Everything lives in this ticket. Why? Because everything, you can say, hey, you requested this, we have it here documented. It's a bit of a CYA, but also, again, a bit of that trust, too, where the expectations all live inside the standard ticket. And it also helps us, too, where we're not bogged down. We know what our roadmap looks like. We know what our resources are. And the stakeholder or the requester knows what to expect. Say, hey, we can do this. Here's the game plan for this. It's not completed yet. They can follow up there. There's a centralized area for communication. Cannot stress that enough. And then again, it's finally once we begin to roll out these reports, we've been telling people, by the way, here's the new process. Here's how reports get rolled out. Then it's that education. And we'll talk about this in the future or in a bit, but it's something called roadshows. And rather than people coming to the data, we'll come to you. And we'll talk about that. And it's going through this promotion of this new reports, of our new gold reports. So let's take an example roadmap. And let's just take any team. You probably can think of one off the top of your head. Where our project plan basically has our main objective. Sales needs automated reporting based on members in order to keep our member count above 70%. Throw it out there. Something random. But that's the objective. That is what's... You have 2 to 3 objectives on what sales needs from their data. Not what they need from Power BI, but what do they need from their data. And then this roadmap that you can actually write out on, here's what's in progress. We had this conversation, so we're going to establish those objectives. We're going to start building up these sandbox reportings for Team X, Team Y, and Team B. Or Team A, B, Team B, Team C. However you want to put it. And then you can basically put in your 30, 90, 180 days. You can continue to expand it to 365 if you need to. But it's basically, hey, this is what's in progress. Here's what we're going to be doing in 30 days for you, team. We're going to really define what a member is. And we're going to get people on your department together to say what those definitions are, and that's how we're going to build a report from here. And our 3-month thing, we're going to have a lexicon for your team. And we're going to have a deeper analytical data for your sales operations team that's going to do X, Y, and Z. And then by our 180 days, we're going to have all of this reporting, these 3 main reports rolled out, or this new deployment rolled out for your team and your adoption. So this is a great way, working with people who, again, may be data averse or may not trust the data anymore, to begin to have that trust and expectations with you as a team. So the next part, everyone's favorite topic, governance. And when we say governance, do not just think this is the bureaucracy and the policies. In the Microsoft documentation on adoption of Power BI, they say governance is not saying no, it's about enablement. And I really do believe that. Granted, I am also one to be very centralized and federated when it comes to BI, because if you have a Wild West, odds are people will find data they don't need to find. But with that being said, if we create a process and we create some policies, that's only going to enable more people. So let's talk about what are some governance projects that you can do. And we're going to talk about some of these in detail. And governance is all about, BI itself and Power BI alone, the tool will not solve your problems. If your company does not have true terms. Again, members, what is sales, what is adoption, if true definitions of the products or whatever your company does. It's going to be very hard to report on anything. So now the need to get other people involved in the company to agree on how we measure things and agree on how we define things is paramount. And we're going to talk about a few of these. And again, having people on your team to help promote Power BI or to promote using the centralized tools BI is doing. It's like you can use Excel. We can deliver a way for you to do that. But if you want the right number and you want the right way to measure it, this is the avenue you go to. Getting people on your team who can really begin to help promote that. And again, this is all about our organization of our content on what reports live where, right? So, hey, if we're developing a marketing report, shouldn't it live in a marketing BI app? And how do we do security, right? Who should have access to those Power BI apps? Who should have access to reports? How do we deploy those and make sure the right people have the right access? And then another great simple way is using data flows. And that's a great way once we get our standardization. If you don't have the development in Azure or Data Factory or Synapse, using data flows is a great way as an intermediary band-aid step. So let's focus on this data champions here. And this is a huge part here where you could call this the governance team, where this is really establishing that terminology. And we just spoke about this, but I wanted to quickly go on this a little more just because of the importance. Again, if someone's expecting you at the organization to develop all these great reports and develop these insights, but the company cannot define a hierarchy for products or a hierarchy for sales, you will not be successful. So understanding getting representation from your departments and your teams for the logic of how we define members, the logic how we define sales, the logic of how we get our core metrics is paramount here. And it really so the team could speak a common language. Fun story here. Back when I was BI analyst, probably in the year 2017, which feels like a long time ago, I was focused on marketing BI, marketing analytics, and 7 in the morning on a Tuesday, and my chief marketing officer came up to me, and he's like, so how many leads do we have? I said, oh, we have 91. He's like, okay, pause. So why does sales say we only have 65? And I'm looking at him like, I don't know. He said, right now, our CFO, our CEO, and myself are in a call and basically almost coming to fists because no one can agree on a number because the sales report says 65 leads, but marketing says 91. Why is that? Turns out marketing considered a lead anyone submitted a form. Sales considered a lead anyone who called somebody, which, if you can imagine, can lead to some disagreements. But just something simple as that, and honestly, something as naive or innocent as that, me building a report, marketing wants something about leads, I have no idea, sales calculates it a different way, is going to lead to that distrust. And all that does is look bad on us and looks bad on the data, where I can't trust this data because someone has a different idea of what they're looking at. Someone has a different definition or different value of what a lead is. So this is paramount to what we do as well. And then there's the internal team governance. And again, part of this too is how do we deliver our data? How do we get people to our change management? And how do we actually build reports? Is it federated where you have a project manager that comes to us and says, here's the report you're building, build it? Do you work closely with the stakeholders? Do you work closely with people who are requesting the report and go through an iterative process where there's a feedback loop or there's that sandbox phase? What do we do for giving access? Can anyone at the company ask anyone and they can get access? Does it go through a chain of commands? Even questions like, who can request a report? Does it have to come from management, or could any Joe Schmo or whoever request a report? And again, it's going through making sure we're building reports with the purpose. So we're talking about governance. We've talked about roadmaps. We've talked about the adoption strategy. And this last part is roll out. And again, all this can be iterative, but especially the first time you really begin to do this, it is important that you have a clear campaign here. And what can we do to roll out Power BI in a successful way? Well, a big part is our promotion, and how do we communicate it? Do we have a centralized area people can get information about Power BI and our data? Or is it coming from emails and Slack and Teams and on SharePoint and Confluence and all these places? Or is there a centralized area where can I get all the information that I need as a consumer to be enabled and empowered by the data? And then let's talk about too having our roadshows, and this is a really neat feature on getting people to, again, we'll come to you. So the first thing is this promotion, and this is a real awesome way to go through and again plan out how we're actually going to talk about Power BI. What's our campaign? What do we want to do once we have our gold data? We've understood our metrics. We're measuring things the right way. We've organized our content. Now what? How are we going to deliver the news to people? And hey, we're changing everything. You're no longer getting 1,800 links to 1,800 reports. Here's a Power BI app. A neat, awesome way when you deploy new reports is a thing called roadshows. So that's basically working with the stakeholder, the report's ready to go, and saying, hey, who's the audience here? One probably should be known already to a degree, but then going through and basically saying, hey, we're going to schedule a roadshow with, can you forward this to everyone who needs to be involved? And going through with the team who the reports the most targeted to, maybe it's like U.S. sales, maybe it's, again, your digital marketing team, and going through like 3 demos on how digital marketing can use that report. Like, hey, I'm a marketer, I need to see how much we've spent, here's how I can do it. Working with a stakeholder to get those 3 demos. Like, give me 3 actionable things that I can showcase. And they'll usually go, oh, you know who would like this? They would love to see their ad spend. So let's do a demo of that. And doing this roadshow, one, saying, hi, I'm the BI team, going through how to get access, and then going through the demos on what this report is, why it's important to them, and showcasing the demos. And for any major reports, roadshows are an awesome way to get the news out. And again, it's that education material where we talked about our SharePoint site or Confluence Center of Excellence, and having these centralized places where I know if I need to learn what's a drill through, I know where to go to that, or I know who to ask and how to ask. And finally, it's how do we measure adoption, right? So again, let's go back to the very beginning here. We tell all the teams and all these people, you need to be more analytical. We need to help you with your data. Are we doing the same thing for ourselves? How can we measure the success of our adoption? And again, a few things, just a few ideas out there, depending on your team, depending on the size of the organization. Use feedback surveys. It's actually another cool solution that Puglia BI does is helping to deliver through lexicon automation through customer voice, Power Automate, and Microsoft Forms to easily deliver surveys to people that basically can be a quick gauge on the value they're getting out of particular individual reports, the trust they have overall in Power BI, and again, even whether I am going from that current to that ideal state, right? Because it goes back to that. What are those objectives? We know where we ideally want to be. How are we getting there? And getting that qualitative side on people go, I still don't know what data is here. I still don't know what drill through is. And I don't look at Power BI still. And getting that baseline first, doing that feedback survey every quarter, every 6 months, depending, and saying, are we progressing here? Using the audit logs, again, there should be no excuse for any BI team not to use the audit logs in some capacity. If you are a Power BI administrator, you have the access to at least the Power BI audit logs. Simple. And let's go back to the scoping and the discovery. This should be an annual or biannual thing that you do where you're going, hey, we had that call, we understood where you're at. Are we getting closer there? Are we getting closer to that ideal state? What are the barriers now? Oh, well, now I have a lot of reports, but I still don't know how to use all these new complex features. I don't know where the bookmarks are. Okay, that's another barrier. Let's break that down. So, again, hopefully there's a lot of information here, so hopefully you got a lot out of this. Again, this is something I'm very passionate about. I love working with people on, whether it's BI teams or organizations. So hopefully you're enjoying the conference so far. Again, my name's Tommy Puglia. You can find me on LinkedIn, find me on the podcast, find me at PugliaBI.com, and hopefully your journey is going well, and hopefully talk to you soon. Thanks, guys.